Welcome, everybody. Welcome to today, the Pause Fest breakthrough sessions. I wanted to start by welcome to the country and acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we gather today and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today too. So this Pause Fest breakthrough sessions started on 28th of July. They conclude on 8th of September, every Friday at midday for approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Today, we have a pleasure talking about a topic, the future of connection, with Emil Rademeyer from Bandel, Sydney, and David Constantine from Ellis Jones Consulting in Melbourne. We also had a third panelist, Melinda Pedestal from Collective, but unfortunately she wasn't feeling great, so we only have two speakers today. What we're going to hear today, well, there's a lot of things to unpack from two different kind of sides. Explore the future of connection, where creativity meets digital innovation to enhance human experiences, understand the metaverse, delve into spatial computing, and discover the potential of generative AI, learn how experiences shape brands, the essence of co-design, and importance of integrating online and offline experiences. Lots of stuff. Next week, 25th of August, we're going to hear Discover Your Superpowers with AI with Accenture Song, Naked Ambition, and D-Smile. As I mentioned before, all sessions are live and include Q&As, so you can ask your questions, whether it's regarding this topic or later on if it's regarding the Pause Awards. That's all completely okay. I want to introduce now the speakers, finally. Emil is the Executive Director, Creative Strategy at Bandel, passion for bridging art, advertising, digital media, content, and culture. Emil is prolific new media trailblazer and respected keynote speaker and judge at key industry events such as Cannes Festival of Creativity, Spikes Asia, Shots, AdFest, Promax Australia, a lot of them. And David is a principal and director of design at Ellis Jones Consulting, educator, speaker, mentor, passionate about power of creativity to impact individuals and organizations, using creativity, identity, and behavior change to create shared value at Ellis Jones. So welcome. Thank you again for being here. And we are having people joining us still, so that's good. I wanted to kick off with the first question today, probably to Emil. What's the bleeding edge of human experience at the moment? What is it that is currently really interesting in this space?
Yeah, it's a great question, George. Thank you so much. When you think about human experience, there's so many things that one can categorize into that word. But for me, it is very, very important to draw a parallel between human experience and human connection. Because in the end, all this technology, all these dreams, all the things that we do as humans on a daily basis is about connection. So human experience, opinion, is void without having human connection. And I love to paint this picture and go, let's go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 years ago. And we think about human connection. How did we as humans or humanoids connect? Or we came together around a fire and there we sat because that was our place of connection. Then we were able to communicate. Spoken word developed and we can share ideas and we can connect with each other by speaking. Then the printing press, we can share those ideas with everyone in the world. It was not just an elite that could connect anymore by means of written text, but we could share that text to everyone around. The next human connection was really the internet, and we were able to connect with people and experience things by dialing a landline number and our modem would connect and we can surf a web page. And as we know, that is really connected or developed into this device in our hands, a mobile phone that we can connect and experience human connection at the touch of a button, no matter where we are, no matter what time. And it's literally human connection at light speed. And what has happened now is, this technology is allowing us to connect with each other online, in the metaverse, in shared virtual augmented experiences. But in the end, it is just another tool for us to connect with people and to experience human connection. And that is when I kind of draw the line and take a step back and go, if you really want to connect with somebody, just give them a smile as you walk past them in the street, because we've developed technology for tens and hundreds of thousands of years to be able to connect with each other. But the ultimate connection is just you reach out your hand and you greet somebody, or you make eye contact and you say hello. So to really simplify it, what is the bleeding edge of human experience? It's just connection. It is just look somebody in the eye and connect. Good day, how are you?
I'm sorry, but somebody's calling me. Keep on calling me today. Very urgent. Sorry for this disruption, and I did put it on mute. So someone really wants to talk to me, sell me something probably. It's a connection, right?
Sure.
Well, thanks for explaining that. Yeah, we definitely have come to a next level of connection in a society, but this time we are wearing it. How does that affect our sort of communication and connection with sort of now all of this, what you explained has been sort of holding and being part of, and this new type of connection is like we have to actually put on something on our heads to actually experience it.
Yeah, I think George is about combining the physical and the digital worlds. We lived for so long in a physical world, then we had the digital world separate. But this new form of connection is really by merging those two worlds, by merging the physical world and by merging the digital world together. If you look through this digital lens at the physical world, you see a new reality, and we call it augmented reality. Augmented just means changed. So we see a changed reality. And that's really the first step that we are taking into this new world of connection, the metaverse, where it is the merging between the physical and the digital worlds. And that can be achieved with, any and all sorts of technology. It can be mobile, it can be computer, it can be headset, it can be Apple Spatial Computing. But for me, the future of connection is by merging those physical and digital worlds that used to be separate into one new meta world. Meta just means beyond. So the metaverse is just beyond the physical universe. So it's the next connection, the metaverse of connection.
Thank you. I'd love to kind of later on ask a little bit more detailed about what particular experiences and how do you see this play out in terms of the brands, usability, just experience of the whole thing. But I also want to ask David now in terms of the brand itself, and if experience is a brand and all brand is experiences, how does a brand influence customer experience and versus employee experience? Product and platform design. What are the advantages of achieving this alignment now in terms of a company?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, George. And I guess it builds a little bit on what Emil's saying. I mean, that we could almost see them as synonymous. Experience and connection. The nature of experience sometimes being transactional, relational, codependent or independent. experience kind of captures all of those things. And so to our people who are joining us, I'll talk a little bit about brand. If it's too jargony or I make it too complex, just call me out in the chat by all means. But similarly, if I'm telling you how to suck eggs, forgive me. We are getting to a bigger point. But ultimately, any entity, product, platform, the identity of that will be strategically articulated somewhere, whether that's through a brand strategy, a brand identity, or similar kind of moniker or euphemism for what that is. Ultimately, a collection, an articulation of the distinct nature of an identity, either for organizational person, product, or platform. But the vehicle that intent, that documented identity enters the world is ultimately experience. We know brands, we experience and interact with brands on the basis of how they feel. I guess more specifically how I feel, or how you feel in relationship to it. And that works within organizations, that works external to organizations with customers, stakeholders, whoever it might be. Internally, you think about employer value propositions, think about the positioning of brand and how it relates to the idea of this kind of tacit moral contract of give-get with every employee of every organization. And ultimately what we say and how we state those identities and those brand identities, they need to line up with the lived experience of the people that work within that organization in order for them to feel engaged, in order to bring them along on the journey with you. To the customer, or through user experience of product or platform, those users or those customers are likely going to be attracted to the brand because of the articulation and the positioning that you put out there. And for those brand nerds as well, the idea of the kind of the values projection or the self-projection of entities, consumers, stakeholders onto the brand itself as well. So the alignment is critical. What was that? Sorry? Was that
somebody has the audio on, so I will ask if you can keep your audio. I'm trying to mute everybody, but
that's all good. All good, as long as I wasn't missing someone. So the alignment critical. The authenticity of the experience needs to validate the claims that the brand puts it out there. So ultimately, that alignment, I think it's the brand strategy being used as an asset in high-level decision-making at an organization. So at an executive level, who do we partner with? Where do we play? Where do we not play? How do we position ourselves relative to existing or new markets? That's not the only executive decision-making tool, of course. Strategic planning and other operational and organizational functions will play those roles. But ultimately, it's a bit of a sense check. And alignment is critical. Knowing who we are and how we state who we are and how we relate with the world. If our actions are incongruent with that, then we're going to create problems for ourselves, and we're going to diminish that brand equity that we're building. In a clear sense, the encoded identity needs to define the value generated through employee experience, but also product, purpose, architecture, user experience are the kind of the vehicles for authentic customer interaction. So if those experiences of any touch point with the organization are divergent or disconnected from the organizational or product identity, then you're going to have problems. You're going to diffuse the brand identity that you're building. You're going to reduce the salience and the front of mind positioning of the brand in audiences, employees, stakeholders' minds. When you create that disjuncture, essentially you create problems for yourselves. And the way that is validated by the market, by your employees, by anyone around the organization is through the experiences and the interactions that they have.
Thank you. There's lots of moving parts from internal, I guess, company and identity, then to external and how people externally portray the company and what company's trying to sort of say, and experiences kind of this common thread internally and externally. And so this is kind of really interesting to have conversation with both of you, because we kind of get this 360 in a way.
Absolutely, and I think it's more relevant than ever in the crossover that you see in the way that brands experience the world. The requirement of a lot of the people that we work with in the business at the moment is to to connect those and to understand the opportunity that ultimately the literacy that employees have and the personal investment against the brand that they work with or for has never been at a higher premium. With people post-COVID seeking greater purpose and values alignment in their workplace or who they work with and for, the onus is on employers to kind of stump up on that. And the opportunity for businesses is to really seek a greater alignment. So in some instances, kind of names redacted, but working with businesses whereby they were doing research on their graduate programs as to why people were coming to the business. And ultimately, the thing that was driving people to join the business in the first place was very much a consumer halo of what that organization's brand was about. What they realized is that they didn't have the internal infrastructure to really live that authentically once these people entered the pipeline of the talent pipeline of the business. So they were undertaking a large exercise in realigning the employer brand and the employer value proposition to the opportunity that presented, because they were doing great work. They were making an impact on the world and in the particular sector that they were working in. Externally, that was recognized, and they had a great halo around their brand and alignment. Internally, there was a complete disconnect, and they were losing talent hand over fist that had a tremendous value to the business, through turnover, through lack of continuity, but also they were just losing great leaders who could have been champions for the brand if they could just adequately articulate and create experiences for them that allowed them to feel aligned and as though they were contributing to the impact that they were trying to bring about.
Yeah, great insights. Few weeks back, we had this conversation about how top growth advice for the startups, and the conversation kind of shifted to the trust. I kind of sort of feel like this is sort of a similar space where, to build the experience, you need to build the trust to sort of build trust between the customers, build trust internally, and deliver those experiences. I would like to sort of swing back to Emil again in terms of the most important announcement this year, I guess, in terms of Apple's big new, steps into the new markets, new possibilities, the what they call spatial computing. And again, this next tool that will allow us hopefully to then step into the next way of connection. And we did have VR for quite some time. It has never really taken off on a consumer level for many different reasons, whether it's a usability or is it a price point, or is it about, why would I have it? Is it just for games? Is it just for a specific purpose? It's just, I know it's used for a lot of experiences, Emil, that you probably have built throughout for the brands type of stuff, but on day to day, I'm not sure what that percentage is, this penetration of the VR headsets. And now we have this new spatial computing entering the market, and nobody has tested this headset so far. I'm not sure if they had. It looks like a big ski goggles. But what is the impact of this potentially on how we work, how we do things? Do you think that Apple's vision is going to live up to the hype and expectations of what they have?
George, great question. 2 years ago, you couldn't open up an article without reading the Metaverse, and you could just follow millions and millions of dollars being pumped into these Metaverse experiences, Metaverse physical digital experiences in one. Digital Land was selling for millions and millions of dollars. Snoop Dogg set up a party pad in the Sandbox, Decentraland. It's another Metaverse universe. Roblox, even Fortnite, they're all Metaverse experiences. And you know what? Apple was quiet. They did not say a word. They did not blink an eye. And then Suddenly they come forward with something, and you know what? Not once in their presentation did they mention the word metaverse, and not once in their presentation they mention the word AI. Now, why are they doing that? Let's rewind 30 years ago. Apple changed the music market not by making a MP3 player, but they changed the music market by making an iPod. After they revolutionized the whole music streaming market and everyone else followed suit, they revolutionized the communication world. They didn't just do a mobile phone in the same way that BlackBerry and all these other smartphones were doing it. They didn't create a smartphone, they created an iPhone. And we know that the day that iPhone was released, it changed communication. You know, it's kind of silly thinking about this, but we never had the internet in our pocket before really that day. You know, Blackberries, they were so cumbersome. You had to surf this mobile internet. I think it was called WAP or something like that. I can't remember.
Terrible.
So they really revolutionized that market. Now, if there's one thing that Apple does is they revolutionize markets. So with spatial computing, they must know that in the same way that the iPod era came to an end, they had to have something else. That was the iPhone. And they must know that that iPhone era has to come to an end at some point. And in my opinion, they see it as this next embodied experience of the physical and digital with spatial computing. And really interesting, it's not a metaverse. They have positioned it completely somewhere else. They've positioned it to be inside their ecosystem, iMessage, iTunes, iMovie, all the things that make part of the Apple universe, you can now experience by means of spatial computing. And yes, absolutely right. It is a $1,800 ski mask that arguably saying it looks ridiculous, it's clunky. But compare that to the first mobile phones back in the day. Remember, we had mobile phones that was this size. It was a brick, and you had to carry the battery pack on your hip, and you had to get the aerial out. So in the same way, I don't expect the first incarnation of a whole new market segment like spatial computing to be as sleek as it will be in 20 years' time. But yeah, I think the industry has to take note because it's not a VR headset. It's not an AR headset. They've positioned it completely different to be a spatial computing headset. So it's really taking the computer to the next step, not virtual reality or augmented reality, but everything you do with your Mac, you can now do it within a physical digital embodiment. So I'm actually really excited to see where this turns out in the next decade or so. Will it be a flop? I don't know. I haven't seen Apple make many flops over the years. Will it change the market? Well, based on their previous records, yeah, they do change markets. I'm very interested to see how spatial computing will influence us consumers on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, the Apple has this interesting thing since, well, the big inventions, they kind of wait for the market to develop a little bit, and then they strike. And they did wait for quite some time for Metaverse and Meta to kind of, but it kind of, yeah, was probably the right timing. And I think Tim Cook wanted to sort of launch something quite new before he retires. There's a lot of talk about that as well. So yeah, it's very interesting. Is there anything in particular you can sort of foresee in a recent 2 to 5 years with what we can expect from the first uses of these types of experiences? Will be more brand content since it is such a expensive. I think when first developer kit VR headset were out, it was, well, mainly for developers to kind of play. I think this is the kind of same play where you'll expect probably some games and some brand experiences. It'll be very much VIP type of play. What do you think?
Yeah, again, I just compare it to the first iPhone. When the first iPhone came out, there was no app store. So the only thing you can use the iPhone was with the phone, the messages app of the iPhone. Safari off the iPhone, the weather off the iPhone, the stocks app off the iPhone. So it was a complete closed ecosystem. So naturally, this first Apple Vision Pro is a closed ecosystem. All that you can do with it is messaging and FaceTime and browsing the web and watching movies. But I think the exciting thing will be is when they open it up for third-party developers in the same way that they launched the iTunes Music Store, then they launched the App Store. So absolutely, in my mind, they will open a spatial computing app store where third-party developers can then start and create experiences. And I think that is really when the magic will happen, because the magic doesn't just happen in Cupertino at the Apple campus. The magic happens when developers from all over the world and creatives from all over the world can apply their technological and creative skills to create new experiences that we haven't even dreamed of. And I'm really excited to see that come out in the next 5 years.
Yeah, they're big to dream big and create the platforms, then everybody else contributes. So they fork out into the tech, but essentially everybody co-creates, co-designs. And that leads me to another question for David. How we might co-design and define experiences together, and what does this make us? Does it make us more productive, or is it more engaged in terms of, again, back to internal brand and business?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question, and it is a pitfall, or perhaps a product of co-design is a very codified term for a whole heap of reasons, and it carries a lot of weight on its back. And yeah, I'm sure most people in any business context have been through a process of either co-design or engagement, and it hasn't. It's done exactly what you just said. Maybe it felt cursory. Maybe it felt like you were being taken along so that you could complain less later on, and that the outcome had been predefined. So to place it, I think in the context of the work that I'm doing day in, day out, co-design is really a toolbox of a whole heap of different ways of engaging. In what we try and do, part of the way that Ellis Jones works is that we use creativity, identity, and behavior as these three, or behavior change as these three lenses. Ultimately, we are often working with organizations that have come to a point where they require pivot. And often the challenge that the catalyst for that pivot, or the challenge that they're facing, is often intersecting. And it's also complex, invariably. There'll be a number of different forces moving on them, or their market, or their product, or internally, or whatever it might be. And so, co-design is always a key part of any work that we're doing, because ultimately you can't be fully aware, you can't be fully connected to the reality of the problems that you're trying to solve without the input of those who are seeing them day to day and have the deep expertise. So, in our world, co-design can be everything from kind of recontextualizing and stress testing, desktop research. It can be just hearing and sharing stories of lived experience, either within organizations, within groups of special interest, or a particular level of lived experience. It could be collaboration, drawing in the right subject matter experts. Often, and this is the case within a lot of the work I've done over the years in traditional kind of disruptive innovation practice, it's about silo breaking and building cross-functional teams within organizations that might be of a certain scale, where they're just not talking to each other and sharing those experiences and the insight that they have. It can be about establishing context, increasingly in vogue, but in my perspective, always has been critical. Problem definition is just as important as ideation and testing. Really understanding the problem you're trying to solve, so that you're solving the right problem. Co-design is a really good way to do that as well. But then there's also, I guess, an imperative for the subject, in big inverted commas, of the co-design process. Ultimately, it feels disingenuous, and it feels inefficient not to involve those people. We do a little bit of work in the health space. We have a particular impact pillar around helping Australia reach a point of equitable access to health and healthcare. And there's a great line that I think originated with the NHS, but it's used widely in the medical space, of no decision about me without me. So the idea that, in that context, it's about patients having sufficient awareness relative to their capability to be able to be participatory in treatment decisions. Understanding that you are still dealing with specialist knowledge and experts and experience, but ultimately they're not disenfranchised by being removed and told what the decision is. And we extrapolate that not only for our work within health and disability and other areas, but across everything that we do in the business. We kind of frame it a little more broadly as, there's no discussion about me and brackets, me and my needs without me being involved. So if you think about it like that, a participatory design process should be a no-brainer to make sure that it's more efficient. You're mitigating substantial risk, particularly when people's significant life experiences or events are involved in that. But you're also creating value as well. It's interesting. I had a really good gig going for a while pre-pandemic where I got invited to these architect and interior design panels. And I could come as the kind of within a business that had research around human behavior change and strategy behind it, and sitting with these very traditional design disciplines, which were much more, certainly that modernist design mentality of we will make things better, brackets, whether you like it or not, or if there is such a thing as better. But they would talk, insert architect or design practice name here, would talk about how they had done co-design on this great project, and they made this shared amenity by conducting a survey with potential residents about what they might want. And then I got to play my formulaic role, which was to sit back and go, awesome. So did you spend any time observing their daily behaviors? Did you ask them about what their frustrations were, what they really wanted to do but were being prevented to do by the conditions that they were living in? Did you do a session with them to kind of get past some of the stigma or the kind of high design language of architecture, so that, did you get some wooden blocks out and get them to actually work through spatial relationships and their experience of navigating the world? And, you can imagine what the response was. Just, blank eyes and closed mouths. And I'm being a little bit glib, but I guess the point is that to your initial question, George, the former scenario where you do a survey and then 9 out of 12 people said, oh, we want a bench in the courtyard, is at best about buy-in and engagement, and at worst about risk mitigation and being able to go, but you got a bench seat. You might have been one of the 3 that didn't vote for it, but we voted for it, and that was co-design. You've been co-designed. The other one, that's what uncovers the unexpressed needs that the people themselves might not even have articulated previously. It finds synergies between different people's experiences and being able to align them, or pain points. And that leads to divergent places. It leads to disruptive places. It might change the question rather than changing the answer. And in my world, that's the value of co-design. That's where it can really transform projects, processes, outcomes, organizations or experiences.
Yeah, you really need to seek. And you've touched on quite a few things here, and I feel like we could talk a lot more about this topic, but it's very interesting because you really work with companies that are in pain. And when you're in pain, you're basically open a lot more to do things that you traditionally don't do. Absolutely. And so my question, maybe to follow up this, is like, do you think that, I guess, the work that you do, when companies are in pain, to do it preventatively, so you actually adopt some of this co-design, co-creation as part of your business practice? I know that impacts leadership heavily, because then who's who owns what, and is this mine, is this yours, how do we function in this type of management situation? But what's your thoughts about that? Do you have any experience when it's not business critical situation? Have any examples of companies doing something like that?
Yeah, it's a really acute observation, and a good one, and it is true. So I mean, to be completely frank, it's part of the reason that a business like Ellis Jones can exist and play at the level that we do and stay the size and as nimble as we are. We play in a space from a I guess, a whole of organization engagement position, a whole of agency or consultancy engagement position akin to the Big Four and other large, BCG or McKinsey or others. So, they tend to be the people that work on the status quo, and they have the bodies to be able to do the high volume, high regularity, high turnover work with governments of all levels, large corporates, and other kind of peaks, NGOs, of a certain stature, who have a demonstrable and large scale impact on the public experience. So it is part of the nature of that reality, is part of why we exist and we do what we do, and we hold the niche that we do very effectively. I think is we tend to be the exotic choice a lot of the time, because we do engage with a lot of these techniques and toolboxes that require more. It's not you outsource the problem, you come back with a report, we continue, and you might find 5 or 10% efficiency here or there. And in organisations of a certain scale, that's not to be scoffed at. But often we are brought in at that point of pivot, and that's a catalyst. That said, I think that there are certain areas. So part of the way to, I guess, introduce that behaviour to the good times rather than the more difficult moments.
Way to the end.
Is to be able to translate those analogous examples. So within R&D, new product development kind of stuff, those parts of businesses and large established businesses have always had an impetus for competitive renewal, for disruptive innovation. When I was working out of London, but across London, Europe, and the States, in product platform development and innovation back in kind of the early 2000s. One of that was the kind of the model, and part of what we did was go into organizations with the frogs and IDOs and others that were our peers in the space, and have those conversations and say, well, you've got these traditional models for R&D and for new product development. There are some good lessons to pull out of that in terms of failing fast and rapid prototyping and testing markets and all that kind of stuff. How do we introduce that thinking across your whole of business in order to ingrain the value of, first of all, the value of an opportunity rather than a particular solution to meet that opportunity, but just a mentality of that opportunism, continually scanning the market and the sector, looking for the emergent thing, looking for the white space, and then building cultures and teams that are capable of dealing with it. The other brief excursus, just to come back to your point, is organizations that are in the status quo. I would argue that at the moment, there is no organization in the status quo. And, particularly there are some things that just are affecting every business in Australia right now. One is sustainable climate transition and a mechanism to be able to facilitate, and the role that organizations play in facilitating a sustainable climate transition. Health and access to health has huge impacts. I mean, there are very pointy case studies from people like AIA and the Vitality program that started in South Africa and is now global, around incentivizing health prevention, better public health, what that means to economies and to businesses and whole ecosystems of businesses outside of traditional health. But just in terms of an aging society, all those kind of things, these people are citizens, but they're also consumers of all of the entities that we're talking about. And then community and connection and cohesion, is always at the forefront. Hard to reach disadvantaged communities, and particularly coming into a time of economic contraction as well, that threshold, that margin is only going to become more heavily populist. And every organisation that's working in any sense, either as a corporate or as a government and service deliverer, is going to have to deal with that increasingly. So we all have these things. Some of our moats are wider than others. Some of our foundations are deeper than others. But ultimately, there are core pivot pressures that are facing all organisations at the moment.
That's true. Everybody's been kind of pushed a bit, so you cannot be sort of sleeping at the wheel at all. Emil, I wanted to ask you, I think we're getting to the very pointy end of conversation. It's been really great to have you today. I did ask earlier if there's any questions, please ask away. This is your final chance. Emil, I wanted to ask you about some digital experiences, whether it be VR, AI, or combination of interactivity across that you've been involved, or maybe even not, something that you've really loved, that you can share with us. What is it and maybe why?
Yeah, digital experiences, in my opinion, is becoming more and more important and more relevant um, in our world. And if we look at all of us here, we are not the future of tomorrow. It's our kids and our kids' kids. So we really have to look at what is the young kids doing today. And for them, it is about those digital experiences where they hang out with their friends, where they collect digital goods, digital clothing, digital avatars, and where they share experiences digitally. And the lockdowns of COVID-19 was really a fast forward in that respect, where we saw musicians launch their entertainment concerts on platforms like Fortnite, and you have brands like Gucci launching their new fashion range on Roblox. What is Roblox? It's a kids game. But why is Gucci launching their new products on Roblox? Because they know that is the future of how people will interact with their brands. Brands do not create products anymore, they create experiences. So, what is that experience that I feel when I interact with a brand or with a product? And a lot of those experiences and more of those experiences would be done digitally and online. So, I'm really keeping my eye on those, let's call them metaverse worlds, like Roblox, like Fortnite, and not really Minecraft. But with Web3 and decentralization, you'll be able to transact in those worlds. You can own land in those worlds. You can really, rather than just wasting your money on a game skin, that game skin can have real value, and it can become a limited clothing item or a limited artwork, digital artwork, in the same way that we have limited edition physical artworks that has been hanging in our galleries for decades and decades, or centuries for that matter. So more and more, I think, if we want to see what the future of connection will be, let's look at the kids and how they are connecting, because they are connecting with Snapchat, TikTok, Roblox, Fortnite. I think that is the next phase of digital experiences. And the brands aren't stupid, because that is where they are. The brands are only where the people are. And that is the next generation. And that's why the brands are launching their products, not just in the physical world, but almost digital first and physical second.
Yes, yes, there's so much of a digital territory that has not been discovered yet. And well, recently to me, but it could be like even last year, the Nike has launched its digital sort of swoosh, and Adidas has been there. And so the things that they can do there and to attract the super fans, what they call, and entertain the super fans, which then influence everybody else, is kind of this sort of top down. But it's a very small segmented group that influences the large groups, and everybody talks about. And that's kind of, I guess, part of what you were talking about just before. But maybe we just end on my last words. Is there anything else?
I've got one thing, George.
Yeah.
I reckon a case study for the group to have a look at, which I've shared with our team here, because it's just the most extreme. I'm back to pain points, but it's just the most extreme turnaround. Wedgwood, the traditional manufacturer of ceramics in China that had been around since the 18th century. The last 6 months, if anyone wants to go and have a look at their Instagram accounts, it's just unfathomable to me that what they have done. They brought in a new brand team, and I can only imagine their sales were going through the floor in order for this to have enough currency to change the brand direction so wholeheartedly. But they completely relaunched the brand. They commissioned a number of 3D artists from around the world to come and 3D scan their most, hundreds of thousands of pound pieces from the 18th century, deconstruct them, reconstruct them, create NFTs. So I think they made 500 individual NFTs, which are just intense and amazing, and the kind of, they could be the kind of things that you could have on screens in galleries, high quality work. They did collaborations with a number of emergent and people of color based fashion labels, or breaking all of the stigma around upper class white English aristocracy having these things in their mansions. They kind of have gone through and ticked off on the list. What if we took this thing from the 18th century and someone just scrawled all over it with paint and then we resold it? What if we turned a physical object and then turned it into a completely virtual object, which then had even more value than the original? The language of the brand, the collaborations has completely transformed in the space of about 6 months. And there's a lot of traditional kind of naysaying trolling going on in it, but at the same time, what I've seen in terms of the way that influencers have picked it up, the proliferation of the brand across a whole new generation of consumers is just immense. So it's, for anyone tuning in at home, have a look on that this afternoon and just have a little chuckle as to, can you imagine the context within an organization that required that level of change? But also, to some degree, thank goodness they did, because as a case study and a first mover to really go hard, I think we could all learn something from it.
That's pretty bold. Do you have maybe a link to that you can share with everybody in the chat?
I'm sure I could. If you talk, I'll find it and stick it in before we finish.
Yeah, that's totally 180, and it's very bold, and it does require a lot of, budgets and collective willingness to change and be open, and I guess choice to bring the correct team to stir that brand in a direction that will then open up for the new possibilities. But that's I mean, it's always much easier to once you see what happens in this transformation to kind of go, wow, this is it. But obviously, once going through it, it's pretty challenge, a massive challenge. So thanks for sharing that story. Maybe on this end, thanks for sharing the link. Here's for everybody in a chat. We'll share this in article as well. Looking fantastic. Already I can see it. Thank you, Emil and David, today for the chats talking about the future of connection. And everybody else that has attended. Have a great Friday and the weekend. These chats will be posted later on today, and you can rewatch it and read it and reshare it. Thanks again.
Thanks so much. Thanks, George. Thanks, David.
See you, everybody.
See ya.